Hey everybody, it's Marty the JavaScript Party. I got my Pizza Hut shirt on. I would like to wear it once in a while, just kind of grounds me, kind of makes me appreciate what I have. And today is Easter. I know the vast majority of people that watch my video aren't in the United States. Videos aren't in the United States, but Easter is a day that we celebrate. A large portion of Americans are Christians, and this is the day that we recognize as the day that Jesus came back from the dead, and it's a very important date for a lot of people. I also believe I think it's the only holiday we have in the United States that is completely based on the planetary cycles. I believe it is the first full moon the after the spring equinox. So I believe I don't know what makes the spring equinox, but it's the first full moon that comes after that. So it's the only holiday I know of that, or maybe it's the Sunday after the first. It must be because it's always on Sunday. So I think it's the Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. I think that's how it all works. And so over my life, at some points, Easter has been in like mid March, maybe like March 20th, March 21st, I feel like is the earliest I ever remember. And this year it's April 20th. So like I think it can span like a whole month depending on because the actual calendar doesn't line up exactly, I think. I don't know. I don't It would be very interesting to do a deep dive into that, like how the calendar lines up and stuff like that. But anyways, so we are working on the voice API. And yesterday I discovered, like, I knew that there were utility types because I've used partial a lot in the past. I worked at one place where, like, literally you just saw partial everywhere because they would have these really intense types, and then the types would have everything in it, and then there were parts. You can't always get all the attributes, so then they would say it's a partial of this type, and all that. But I did not know there was a record type, and the record type is like sort of the answer to a lot of issues I've had over time. That's this guy right here, because it's a really easy way to create a map. Um, so in this record, I say, hey, I want a map of the expected type, which there's only three expected types. There's expected and found, expected and not expected. And then the color, a corresponding color, which expected and found, I believe, is a green. I think if you mouse over, sometimes it'll actually, when you have these hexes, it'll show you, but I guess I don't know exactly when. Let me see if I paste this. If I take this, yeah, see, so the expected and not found is like a orange. I would prefer to yellow because the way our lights work here in the United States, I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but is we got red lights for stop, green lights for go, and then yellow lights for caution. But yellow is kind of hard to read against a white background. So then that's our red, and then expected and found is green. So, and I did want to mention that, like, I don't think that, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of some weird stuff that, like, when I was a small child, I remember there were people that absolutely refused to use grocery stores. They're like, yeah, I'm never going to a grocery store. I want to see where my food came from and all that. They just refused to do that. But now everybody does stores. I think that we are really up in the air about artificial intelligence and things like ChatGPT, and stuff like that. So I never would have discovered this record thing. I searched hundreds of times for something to do what this record does. Never wandered across it, and then just randomly wandered across it in interacting with ChatGPT. So, but I do think that it is a brand new technology, and as users of it, it's so new that we don't really have any good guardrails on a personal basis of like what you should do. Like when I was a kid, I remember dogs would just walk in the road. I mean, you like if you're driving and there was a dog, you always had to be on the lookout for dogs because they would just walk in the road. They would not even look. They would just. And then I remember the first time I think I was in my early 20s when I saw a dog actually look and wait for cars to go by and then walk. And now I never see a dog just walk in the road. They always, if there's a dog that's off leash that's sort of gotten out or whatever, they all look, you know, like dogs did not have that built into them. I feel like that's how we are with large language models and AIs and stuff. We just don't know how to keep ourselves physically and mentally safe with them. And since we're just sort of like making this up as we go, I feel like whenever you're working with a artificial intelligence, you should always sort of do a little self inventory. So like one thing I want to do is I want to do to start with just a JSON and making that JSON show up in here. So if I go into this API component, so let's go to our components and go to API. We go here and I say, I don't know, let's go to this API thing. API TypeScript. And I say like API API colon string equals coming soon. And I will get back to my point. I know I watch myself all the time and I'll start making a point and then I just move on and I just forget. And then I come over here and I say, okay, what I want to do is I want to do, and then API. And I think that'll just work. That'll work just fine. All right, but what if I say that and then JSON? See, it breaks. And I don't like for almost up until, well, any professional environment I've ever been on, you could just do this. And that's because I have not worked on a professional application that was beyond, I want to say Angular 14. There was some big changes in Angular that happened at 14 that made it to where it was extraordinarily difficult for people before that to move over. And I think it was for organizations that were using third parties, and I think PrimeNG might be the main one that like they use some sort of feature that was in older versions of Angular that is not in the current one. But this is a change, and this is because before standalone components, your module always, I don't know if it was by on purpose or whatever, but it always had this thing called commons, some kind of comment thing. And so if I do this and I go to ChatGPT and I say this, and I just put that in there, and we'll see what it says. Okay, so that usually works for me. I'm just going to say that usually works for me. In a template, but it is not in my, let me give it a hint component. And now it should tell me that I need to enter like some kind of commons or something. Oh, so JSON pipe. So apparently I can do this import. And then I'll just say, is there also a common library import that I can do? If you're tired of importing. So common module. Okay, yeah. So I couldn't remember this common module. So now I can do this, and I can come over here, And I could say common module, and then, so this common module used to always be everywhere. And I don't know if it was like, and I don't know what this is. That's weird. Um, but I can do this, right? And let's see. I don't know. Okay, here we go. So now it is that, well, that problem went away. So now I could make this like, let's get rid of this. I'm just going to make it an any, and I'll just say like this. Label coming soon. So then I can come over here, and I don't know why it says API. Hit save. That was weird. Save. Okay, I don't even know what's happening. Let's just stop it and start it again. So obviously that should not say API, right? There's no API there. I think we found some sort of little funny edge case weird bug in Angular. It still says API. I am looking at the API component. This is insane. I am completely and utterly lost here. Let's kill the browser. Come to a different browser. What is happening? I am completely, let's see. What am I doing? What is going on here? That is just bizarre. Okay, I'm gonna kill my whole browser. I do not know what's happening. What if I change? Am I looking at the API component? I felt like I was. Let's go look at the discrete component. Well, let's go to the continuous component because that's another easy one. So continuous. Now, if I look in here, am I going to see continuous? Okay, so we are obviously not loading these components because this just says continuous down here. So there we go. So let's come in here. Okay, so we are not actually loading the component. For API or continuous, see, for discrete, we do our app discrete. So that was a bad assumption on my side. That means all, well, okay, so still, I guess everything was kind of funny in that app API, in that it was breaking and all that, but it kind of screwed up my whole freaking demonstration. Okay, so it's saying that API is not a known element, and I think that's because up in here we need to bring in the API component in the imports. I mean, Well, it says we have the API component. Okay, maybe it's not app API. That's app API. And then in app, well, it's upset in app HTML, which is what we were looking at. App API. And then back to here. API component. And then that is up here. This thing is called API component. And then, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And that's what we call it, right? We call it, I think it's app API. Let's come back over here. Yep, it's app API. Come back in here. Put a comma. I think it's just the same thing. Yeah, component. Oops. This is weird. I don't know. We're in a weird, bizarro world situation. Oh. Don't know. Do not know what's happening here. Okay, so now let's go back over here and Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control. And we see our JSON piped thing. So normally, like everywhere I work, that is there. But, and the point I was trying to make before that I'm finally going to come back to is when I went to ChatGPT and I asked it about this, first of all, I feel like it led me down a bad path. I think Common Module is a better thing to load than individual pipes. But maybe not. I don't know. I hadn't even thought of that before, of just in loading the individual pipe as opposed to the common module. I don't know. That's gonna take me a couple days to kind of think through. But I do. But I knew what I wanted. So before I even started interacting with ChatGPT, I was like, what is my vulnerability here? How vulnerable am I? And since I kind of knew exactly what I wanted, I literally was just using it to augment my memory. I think I had almost no vulnerability. It did try to put me down a different path than I wanted to go down, so I went down the path that I wanted to go down, and then I'm going to put a lot of thought into the alternate path that it presented. But I wouldn't have even known of this common module path if I hadn't already kind of knew what I wanted. So if you kind of know what you want, you have it, and you're just using it sort of just so you don't have to do some weird ass searches on Google, it's probably really, really, safe to use it. Now, if you have no idea what you're doing, like if you're like, oh, my knee hurts, can you help me? ChatGPT, and you don't know it, and you don't have any idea what you want, man, you're vulnerable. You're really putting yourself at risk by using the artificial intelligence. Who knows what you might do and how much debt you might end up in and how at risk you might be putting yourself by just sort of blindly following along when you don't have any idea. But if you're like, oh, there's this salve that my grandmother used to make for me, and it had like, I remember it had lemon, it had like paprika, it had this and that, but I can't remember what the eighth ingredient is. ChatGPT, can you try? Do you have any ideas what that eighth ingredient might be? You're very low vulnerability there. But if you're like, hey, ChatGPT, I need to a salve to put on my knees so that the swelling goes down, you're very, very vulnerable. Who the hell knows what you're going to put on your knee? If you're like, hey, my knee's swollen, can you help me? Jesus, you are so at risk. You do not want to do that. But anyway, so now I thought we were already pulling in our component. I guess since we're doing this and since we already ran into this problem, let's go ahead and bring in our continuous component too. So we don't have to go through that pain point next time. I think it's called continuous. Kind of wish I'd have just done it then. I don't think I really gained any knowledge or wisdom before. So let's see if it breaks again. And then so we want our, which one was it? It was, yeah, continuous component. And there it is right there. Oh, so that is the thing, is it automatically brought it in for us. Because that was not there. We just did this. So it automatically brought it in for us, but it didn't save it. So now we came up here and we were just completely and utterly confused because it's like, I am importing it. I'm a genius. I was already importing this. Why is it saying I didn't import it? So now let's hit save. Let's see if we go through this same weird thing. Okay. So, yeah. So now it kind of makes a little more sense what happened last time. Now, why? When, I guess because I probably hadn't saved the whole time. It was probably sitting there with that little white dot next to it the whole time before. But now we won't have to go through that next time. And we did learn what happened last time. I'm pretty sure if I go back and watch this video, which I probably will next week, I'll see that it wasn't saved. And then that's why I kept saying, and I kept making changes, and it wasn't, they weren't reflecting, and I don't know. That was very strange. But anyway, so now we have our continuous, we have that, and we need to go back to our service, and we need to create a variable, which is going to be a dictionary, a record, and it is going to have a string as the key, and it's going to have at least for now, a description as its value, which is a string. So I guess it'll be a record with a string and a string. So let's just say this and say, we'll call this properties. And so this is going to be property map. We'll call it property map. And it is a record. And its key is a string. And its value is a string. And for starters, it's just going to be empty. And now what I want to do is I want to loop over all of the values in this recognition. And I want, or all of the keys in this recognition, and I want it to put them into this property map. So let's go ahead and do that. So we are going to say, and I remember that when I did that before, that like almost every key was almost every single key was inherited. So they didn't show up, but I couldn't just say like object.keys. I had to write some code to do that. So let's go ahead and ask ChatGPT how to do that. And so on a vulnerability before, when I was interacting with the ChatGPT, I felt like I was a zero. I was totally invulnerable because I knew pretty much what I wanted, and I was just asking it to fill in the gap for me. And I actually appreciated the fact that it kind of showed me that I could just pull in that JSON pipe by itself, not as part of the Commons module. This time I've done this before, like kind of gone through and written code that sort of does gets the keys and then goes into the children or goes into whatever it inherited from, gets the keys there, and then goes into whatever inherited from and gets those keys. I've done that before, but I'm not super, like, I've only done it a few times and it's been a very long time since I've done it. So I would say on a vulnerability index, I have a pretty good idea what I want, but I don't know exactly what I want. So I'm going to say I have one vulnerability, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, I have one I am vulnerable point of one where I could end up doing something I just don't even want to do that is not in my best interest because I don't really understand what I want. So I think it makes sense to give but I'm pretty sure I have a good idea. So I have a decent idea. If I see something way off the wall, I'm definitely not going to fall for it. So I'm going to do this because I kind of like doing it this way. And now it's going to tell me what I did. So that's nice. So yeah, we are on the same page, ChatGPT. And that's another thing is ChatGPT quite often will think that you're talking about something different. And so it's important to make sure that you know you're on the same page with ChatGPT when you're. So I would like a list of all of its properties, slash attributes. But I believe most of the properties slash attributes are inherited. So a simple object.keys won't work. Period. You're absolutely right. Event targets speech recognition. Many of its primitives won't show up in object keys, even or in. Here's how you can include inherited ones, and so it gives me a nice little function, which is pretty cool. I won't need the function word in front of it, but you can pass. I could pass this recognition to this, and then it will return all of the properties. So I think I can just do this. I can just copy this function. So again, I think you need to do a quick inventory and decide, okay, am I doing something stupid here? I don't think so. It's only a few lines of code. I don't really like do while. I don't, but you know, whatever. I don't really need. I don't think I need to dig into this. I believe I'm going to have to tell this that it's any object. And the reason I have to, we kind of went down a rabbit hole like this once before. This recognition doesn't have any official typings because it's really up for grabs. There's a lot of changes getting ready to happen. I mean, it's a WebKit. It isn't documented. It hasn't been fleshed out. So it's cutting edge is what you would call it, I think. So then I want to say this dot property map equals, and this should not work. This dot get all. And then this dot recognition. Okay, so that's not going to work, and that is going to work because it's looking for two strings, and I believe this will just be one string, but I'm not sure. So I'm just going to call this a const properties. And I'm actually very curious. And I think, and I just literally just made up this sort of, like while I was walking my dogs this morning, kind of came up with this idea of like your vulnerability index and all that. Okay, so for strong typing, being, being what does get all properties return? So here, vulnerability exit. So for getting this file all together or getting this code, I gave myself a vulnerability. I was one vulnerability. Now for this asking for strong typings, I'm giving myself back to 0 vulnerabilities. I don't think there's any risk whatsoever in this question. So okay, so it's going to return an array of strings. I think we need this. It's kind of interesting. So it wants me to call that an object instead of an any. And I guess that makes sense. So this thing will take any object. Oops. Is it a little o? Yeah. And it'll return a string, an array of strings. Now, interestingly, I'm seeing an error down here. It says unknown is not assignable to string. Okay, so const result. It's kind of interesting because, yeah, I think that, yeah, it's kind of weird. String equals props as string. I don't know if it'll let me do that. As unknown. And then return result. I feel like it should be smart enough to realize that the property names of objects are always strings, but I guess that is it makes sense that it wouldn't understand that. Okay. So now we know that we have a set of strings. Like the other thing I probably could have done was probably just return like something weird, and it probably would have told me that it's returning a list of anything. But it was easier to deal with this at very low risk. There's nothing to worry about. And I think it's super important to make sure that you always always think of how vulnerable you are anytime you're interacting with AI. I think that that's super important if you're going to do any kind of thing. If you're going to use AI, you have to think to yourself, how am I? Now, like a lot of people, like when they talk about this kind of stuff, they're kind of like, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. We're all going to be enslaved by AI. And it's just like, I think that would have been saying that it's inevitable that all dogs would get run over, are eventually going to get run over if we have cars. But dogs eventually adapted. They eventually got to where they would go to a road, they will see the asphalt, and then they'll look, and they will not get hit by a car. Like, we will adapt. We will figure out how to use this tool in such a way that, yes, it's one of the most dangerous tools that have come out in my lifetime, but it's probably way less dangerous than like when fire first came out. Like when fire first came out, people were probably effing themselves up on a regular basis. And then, with time, people started building things out of things that were fireproof, and, like probably before that, it was just like, hey, I could put up a little hut and stay out of the rain, and I can build it as much as I need to build it. And then when I need to move on, I can just move on, just leave it where it's at. And then next thing you know, It's just like, man, one little fire to keep warm, and this whole thing just burns to the ground. And people, we adapt, and I think AI is going to be the exact same thing. We will adapt. So these are all of our properties are right here, and so and it says that it's a set. So when I console log the result, it says set 41. So is there a more accurate return type? Because it seems like if this is saying it's a set, then maybe it should be returning a set. It should be saying that it's returning a set. All properties function. Again, let's do it. Let's take a second. How vulnerable am I? On a scale of 1 to 10, how vulnerable, if I get a completely wrong answer back, how much can it hurt me? And I would say that will be a 0. I think this is a fully safe question to ask. The actual term, interesting. Okay, so it's saying, hey, that's how you do it. That might be right. That might be right. The internal set. Okay. All right. So next thing I want to do is I want to populate my property map. Okay. So I have my properties, and unfortunately, that's not that. So I would like to do. I could just do it right in this function here, but right inside of this constructor. But this constructor is already pretty long. It's already a bit unwieldy, so let's go ahead and just sort of outsource that to another function. So this dot set just set property map. And I think this function is going to end up being pretty big because all of those descriptions are going to end up being captured in here. I'm going to have a big old if then. If it's this one, then set this description. If it's that one, set that description. And so map. And we're going to pass that to properties. And we'll come down here, and then we'll just create a new function, set property map. My wife is cooking for for Easter, and it's starting to smell so good. I spent most of the morning like moving everything out of the dining room so that our Roomba, or we have a Eufy, our Eufy can do all the sweeping and doing everything. So so our Eufy can do all of the it can clean the floors, and that's sort of our little deal. Is like on any 3-day weekend where she does a lot of cooking, I take care of the floors. I make all the floors as spotless as I can possibly make them, and so that ends up being like 7 times a year, maybe 8 times a year. So about 8 times a year, all the floors get completely cleaned, and I think that's a good time. As I get older, I'm kind of getting better and better at like doing things at the appropriate time. So we're going to say this dot property map dot, we're going to loop over all the properties. So properties dot for each. So funny story, like last week in my other shit show of a video stream. It's supposed to be about 3JS, but it is sort of devolved or maybe evolved. I don't know what the right word would be, into all about unit testing, because I had decided early on this time, because this is my second shot at this, building something like this out. This time I'm going to have 100% unit test coverage on everything. And like this entire month, I've done nothing but unit tests. But in one of the episodes, I came to the absolute conclusion that if I'm doing a for each and I'm passing in a function, I will always pass in like a separate function. I won't ever do the inline function in one episode. And the very next episode, because of the very next unit test that I had to do, I completely got rid of that. Completely got rid of that rule. So I was just like bound and determined I will never ever. So that I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, so I'm going to take my this dot property map, and I'm going to take the prop, and I'm going to say that it's description coming soon. And that is what my property map is. Now, should I make this like protect this, like make this private and then get a getter and then just only give this via like a getter, or should I like set up a signal and have it listen for a signal or whatever? I don't think so. If we were working multiple developers, larger scale, things like that, then yes, of course, we would need to do all that. But we don't need to do that here. Because like no other part of the application is ever going to care about this property map. I am confident. This property map is just literally just for this lookup. Now, I'm very curious why this thing is just spinning. Oh, because it's paused in the debugger. Okay. So now, do you know the, do you know the Cookie Man, the Pumpkin Man? I don't know. Anyways, do I have a reference to the speech service from the API component? No, we do not. Okay, so I like having the injector, the new inject function from Angular. So this thing is called, it's a speech service. It's called a speech service. It's a type speech service. And that is equal to inject speech service. Now, we got red. We have a blue thing here. So this blue thing is going to do one of two things for us. It's either going to bring in inject for us, or it's either going to bring in speech service for us. I do not know why, which one. It'll be 50-50. So it offered to bring in the speech service. So yes, I will use that to help. Thank y'all. Now this one is yellow. I don't know why it's not blue. And it's offering to bring the inject. And it's wanting to bring it in from, it's wanting to do one of three things for us. It'll bring it in from core, which is what we want. It's also willing to bring it in from testing. I don't have the biggest idea what that would do. Or it's willing to like create an inject function for us. So I would like the one from core. Now we hit save. And we have a speech service. Okay, so now what I would like to do is create a constructor. So you used to, if you're using any older version, or you can still do it, you used to put inside the constructor when you wanted to inject something, but they added this inject. I will say this, I like this better. I feel like I prefer code to configuration in general, but I think I like this better because if you're going to be doing unit testing, it makes like pulling it in easier. It may make mocking it harder. I don't know. In my other show, I worry about that. So anyways, so this dot API is equal to speech service dot, what is it, properties? What was it? Property map? Yeah, property map. And booyah, we good. Now, let's go ahead and fix our typings. Sync those up. What is a property map is, where are you? It's a string record. Man, that is a game changer for me. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I wanted this over the last 4 years. That typing. This is a typing I've been searching for years now. And I think we can just make this an start. We can start it with a empty thing, empty object. So basically, and we don't need this anymore. So the next step is, I think, there's a couple steps we could do. We have a couple next steps that we could go down. One, we could start, like, I could transform this into a string, an array of strings, and then build out the table, or I can populate the descriptions. Well, let's see, because I know that we were moving down a different path. Oh, supported language map. Oh no, that's our supported languages. This thing. Oh, okay, so these are just our colors. Okay, so we are going to want, instead of this being a string, we're going to want this to become a object that has this value, whether it's expected and not found, which everything, this is our expected list. And so if anything ever appears in the list that isn't this, then there's that. And actually, I think we do need to, once, I guess we need to do this we need to create our initial thing. So we do, okay, so what we need to do is we need to create this as our base map, and we need to just like have it hard-coded somewhere, that this is what we're looking for. And then, and we want to have a description in there, and we want to have whether it was expected, not expected, or not found. I think we actually already have our, inside of wherever this expected type, I think we defined. Yeah, so we have our property, our value, and then our type. So we need to create a list of APIs that is this. So I think I was skipping a step. So this is our property map, and I'm just going to say API map. Which this is, I think, just going to be an array of APIs. Let's see, what was I think it was API. Man, that seems like a bad name. API property. It probably should be like voice API property, but I think API property is enough. So it's an array of these things, and we will initialize it. That was a word I could not come up with a second ago. We'll initialize it with an empty array. So basically, what we want to have is a array of these API properties that then can that will have the value, the name, the value, and whether it's expected or not. And we need like a list of expected APIs. I don't think we need to store the value yet, but we probably do need to store the description. So basically, we need to we yeah. So we're at some point I'm just gonna need to like do a copy and paste once we have descriptions, and then maybe we'll even get rid of that code. But anyways, we are 50 minutes in, so that was a good amount of time. It was a good video. I hope everyone has a wonderful Easter day and happy coding. Bye.